Hello, everyone. I am Aprajita, a story scholar with the 1947 Partition Archive. You have been seeing me for the past week hosting some amazing speakers. This is 75 Days of Partition, and today I am doing this event with Gunita. To keep you interest going on, we have here with us today Professor Ishtiaq Ahmed. Um, he needs no introduction, but for those who are new here, he is a Swedish political scientist. He is Professor Emeritus of Political Science at Stockholm University. He is also Honorary Senior Fellow of the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. And he's the editor in chief of the Liberal Arts and Social Sciences International Journal. Besides teaching mainstream subjects such as political theory, he has also lectured and written extensively on the politics of South Asia, mainly Pakistan and India, but also Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. So his recent release is Jinnah, His Successes, Failures, and Role in History. And it won the 2021 Best English Non-Fiction Book Award at the Valley of World Literary Festival, Dehradun, India. He has also written extensively on the partition of Punjab and its politics, including the book The Punjab Bloodied, Partitioned and Cleansed. And it has been translated into Urdu, Hindi, and Gurumukhi Punjabi. I welcome you here, sir.
Thank you very much. Very kind of you.
So we are really looking forward to the discussion on the politics of Punjab in 1947. And I hand over the mic to Gunita for the question.
Thank you so much, Aprajita. So I'm excited to have this three-way discussion today together with you, Professor Ahmed. I think one of the things that I really wanted to touch upon was people are really unclear because it's really not taught what the political landscape of Punjab looked like. And I'll kind of pose a number of questions at once so that you're able to kind of develop a fuller picture for us in no particular order. So first of all, I think people aren't aware that there were more than two political parties in Punjab. In fact, there was a unionist party that was opposed to partition, and I think that's really interesting as well. And then also, who actually got to vote in Punjab? I know not the whole population was getting to vote, so who was actually voting? Who was actually aware of what was going on? And then finally, I wanted to also touch upon the Maharajas. What was going on in that realm? So turning over the mic to you, Professor Ahmed, if you can shine light for our audience on the political parties present at the time.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Gunita Bhalla. It's a pleasure talking to you and Aparjita. Let me share with you a very interesting fact about the Punjab. I call it the Punjab because now they have dropped the. I still hang on to it because it's part of a memory, a Punjab which is gone. Okay, the land of the five rivers. We can say like this that at the beginning of the 20th century, when the nationalist movement gained momentum all over India, the earliest impact it had was in Bengal and then in Punjab. And resistance to the British took place, first of all, during the Ghadar Party, which was a number of revolutionary Punjabis mainly, but others too, who came from California and Canada because they were not admitted to Canada, although they were subjects of the British king according to the law. So they came and they tried to stir people to a revolution, which was crushed ruthlessly. Then we have the Jallianwala Bagh tragedy on the 13th of April 1919, and I think it's too well known for me to comment on. Mainly, Punjab was a loyalist province dominated by landlords with a radical sort of movement which was anti colonial, anti imperialist. But the dominant classes, Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs, were very pro British because Punjab, after the British annexed this part of India, they promoted it as the frontline province from where they conducted their great game vis-a-vis the Russians in Central Asia. You know, this famous Nobel Prize winner, Rudyard Kipling,
Right.
his, his novel
Yes.
Kim's Gun is based in Lahore. And that's the story is about people undercover going to Central Asia as horse traders, but actually they were there to collect uh, intelligence. Okay, so that was,
Fascinating.
yeah. And in order to win over the Punjabis, the greatest network of barrages and canals, at that time in the world was done in Western Punjab, which up until then was semi desert. So, semi desert was converted into green fields, and the Punjab became famous as the granary of India. It fed many parts of India. So, during this period, we find the Indian National Congress getting frustrated all the time when it tried to come to the Punjab. Why? Because the leadership, largely Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs, they all had benefited from British benevolence, if you want to call it. Uh, the second party that I think we should mention is the All India Muslim League. Until 1938, would you believe it? They didn't have an office even in Punjab, in Lahore, which is the capital of Punjab. It was a collection of Muslim notables, if you want to call it, who would meet once a year, and that was the Muslim League. But then I think uh, sometimes in the 1920s, when after the 1909 India Independence Act, which sort of opened participation, but still limited to about 1 to 2% of the people who had the right to vote. In 1919, this was extended a little further. And what they did in the Punjab was what they had done at the All India level. In 1909, they granted separate electorates to the Muslims as well as weightage, more representation than the numbers. When it came to the Punjab in 1919, they gave overrepresentation to the Sikhs, who were a minority. Let me give you the population breakdown. At the beginning of the 20th century, it was 56% Muslim, 29% Hindus of all types, including the scheduled castes, and then 13.2% Sikhs. If you include the princely states, which were mostly in eastern Punjab, and then one in central Punjab called Bahawalpur under a Muslim Nawab, if you count that, your populations into the greater Punjab sort of thing, then the Muslim percentage would come down to 52.3. The Hindu population would remain 28.8 something, and the Sikh population would go up to 14.1%. But after 1919, the Sikhs were given 18% representation. So the main group who had to make the concessions were Muslims. So, so this
And,
tripartite sort of conflict already started regarding the representation.
and what was the purpose for doing that, for overrepresenting the Sikhs?
The same as for overrepresenting the Muslims at the All India level, because the imperial power always needs to have minorities on their side.
But sir,
That's it's a
besides
simple
Congress,
classic. It's a simple classic political move. For example, in Syria, the problem that we face today, why have this group by uh, what's Assad? Why are they ruling Syria when they are only 11% of the population? They are Alawite Shias, whereas 78% of the Syrian population is Sunni Muslim. So wherever imperialism goes, it tries to recruit the minorities on its sides and uses it against the majorities. This is a classic way to hold on to a region.
Fascinating.
So
Another
as you
interesting thing, yeah, another
yeah, as you
interesting,
say,
sorry,
like the
say,
Congress was not having such an impact on the Punjab region, and Muslim League gained a very late hold, coming making an opening an office in Lahore in only in 1938. But there were a few local parties, political parties, which had been formed at the time, which were having
yeah,
an influence over Punjab.
yes, yes, yes. I'm coming to it. Please hold your guns. I was going to tell you all that. In the 1920s, Mia Fazle Hussain, an educationalist, uh, he founded the Punjab Unionist Party in 1923. And I think this is what Gunita ji had in mind when she named this party. And this was a fascinating thing because it was based on the wisdom of the wisdom of the Punjab handed down the centuries by the Sufis, the Gorakhnathi yogis, the Bhakti sons, and the Sikh gurus was live and let live. Sulay Kul, yani friendship of all. This is one part of the story of Punjab. Simultaneously, the Punjab was always facing the first invasions coming in from the northwest. So that's the story of Punjab. At the level of people, communal, if we may not want to call it harmony, but peace, living side by side was stable and reproduced easily. Whereas if you go to the rest of India, the Indo-Gangetic sort of thing, the Ganga plain and all, you have always orthodoxy, Hindu, Islamic, you know, but in the Punjab, all this was softened by the teaching of these sages of the Punjab. So I would say that the Punjab Unionist Party drew on this wisdom. And so you had, of course, since Punjab was Muslim dominated, it was a rural based party, by the way.
Interesting.
Yeah, people with the land owning background were the leaders. And among the leaders, Sir Fazle Hussain, then Sir Chotu Ram from Haryana, a Hindu Jat. He was
Yes.
leader number two. And then they had Sikh leaders like Sundar Singh Majithia of the Sikh Nationalist Party, who always supported them from the outside. And they were also admitted in the ministries. So the Punjab Unionist Party ministry would include Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs. And Fazle Hussain gave one message, hands off to Congress and to the Muslim League. Sir Fazle Hussain dies in 1936 before the fatal election of 1937, I would say. And he was succeeded by Sir Sikandar Hayat, who continued this tradition but made some uh, uh, concessions to the Muslim League, which created a problem later on. Just to wind up the Punjab Unionist Party, Sir Sikandar died in December 1942 and was succeeded by Malik Sir Khizr Hayat Tiwana. Sir Fazle Hussain was not a big landowner but came from a well to do Muslim family. But Sir Sikandar Hayat was a big landlord, and so was Sir Khizr Hayat Tiwana. But they were not communal in their orientation. So that's the background of the political parties of the Punjab. How did then the Muslim League make a breakthrough? And I've argued like this. Let me give you the basic structure. If there was no partition of India, there would be no partition of the Punjab. But logically, it does not follow that if there was a partition of India, the Punjab must also be partitioned. That's not logical. Punjab could have remained independent as a third or fourth dominion, as Sir Khizr Hayat Tiwana suggested. It could have gone uh, without any partition to Pakistan, as the Muslim League wanted, or it could have been partitioned as the Congress and the Sikhs wanted. So this was the logic which developed regarding the partition. So what happens then is the 1936 election, in which the Congress swept the Hindu majority provinces, but it also got a massive victory through Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan in the northwest frontier, which was actually a 94% Muslim majority province. In Punjab, the Punjab Unionist Party won all the seats except two. I think the reserved seats for Muslims in Punjab at that time were 75. The Punjab Unionist Party, 1937, was under Sir Khizr Hayat Tiwana. It won 73 seats. Two were won by the Muslim League, of which one crossed the floor and joined the Punjab Unionist Party because he was offered a ministership. How these politics work. So one seat for Muslim League. In Sindh, which was 71% Muslim, not a single seat was won by the Muslim League. The Sindh unity parties, Sindh Ittihad Party and others won most of the seats, and Congress also in Sindh. Balochistan didn't have elections, it had a Shahi Jirga of the tribals. Okay, so this was the situation. But 1937, then Jawaharlal Nehru makes this two statements which I think we have to keep in mind. One was in 1936, he declared that in future India we will abolish Zamindari system. Now that was a big blow to all those who were big landowners anywhere. The second was he went even further and said that we will recast India in accordance with the way the Soviet Union was developing. So that must have frightened even the British, that under Nehru, India could go red. So two forces now were apprehensive of the Congress's intentions. Okay. Another statement Nehru made was that there are two forces in India, the British and the Indian National Congress. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the leader of the Muslim League, I say, despite my disagreement with his politics, I have to admit he must be a leader of great, determination. He gave a message. He said there are four forces in India, four powers: the British, the Indian National Congress, the All India Muslim League, and the princely states.
Right.
So the princely states, 565, if you add them, it becomes a big problem for the Congress to argue they represent all Indians.
Yeah.
So that's the equation which is emerging at this time. And Jinnah Saab then convinced Sir Skandar Hayat that, look, we enter into a compact. At the All India level, all members of the Punjab Unionist Party who are Muslims would be represented by the Muslim League. Whereas in the Punjab, you are welcome to rule as you want. This was a amazing calculation that Jinnah made, because immediately it created problems for Sir Skandar Hayat, because Sir Chotu Ram, he protested. He said, you have entered into an alliance with the party which is ideologically opposed to us in all senses of the word. They are communalist. We are against communalism. So Sir Skandar said, no, don't you worry. This is only to keep the Muslim League out. But here we do things as we want. But then comes another tragedy. Sir Skandar dies in December 1942. And so within the Punjab Unionist Party, a, a tussle to succeed him starts. And there are many factions in the Punjab Unionist Party. One led by Sir Skandar's son, Shaukat Hayat, and another by Nawab Mamdot. But the majority went with Malik Khizar Hayat Tiwana, who I must say was a thorough gentleman, a true Punjabi in that sense that he would not distinguish between Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs. So that's the situation when we find many other blunders being committed by the Congress. The Second World War breaks out, and the Congress ministries resign in protest instead of giving a helping hand, and then there would have been no partition, I can tell you. They said, no, you hand over power to us. We, as an independent sovereign nation, will then decide whether we want to fight fascism, and we do it in our own way. Would the British let that happen? No, because India was the colony from where they recruited 2.5 million soldiers, of which more than 1 million were only Punjabis. Remember that.
Right.
Sir Skandar Hayat, when the war started, here's a statement in my Punjab book saying that I'm going to recruit 500,000 soldiers more for the British Indian Army. So Punjab was, in that sense, very important for the British. And the Congress had no hold in the Punjab. Jinnah Sahib goes to Viceroy Linlithgow and says, look, now you can understand the importance of the Muslim community. We will support the war, and at the end of the war, you promise that the right of self-determination will be granted to the Muslims. So that's the beginning of the partition argument.
Mm.
Next thing which happens then is on this was September 1939 when the war broke out. During this period, Jinnah and Linlithgow came very close to one another. I have two statements. One by Jinnah saying, up until now, it was only Mr. Gandhi, Mr. Gandhi, Mr. Gandhi. But now they are laying the red carpet for me. This is Jinnah. I quoted him verbatim. And he went and told, Lilithgow is on record that had Mr. Jinnah not supported us, maybe we could not have been able to hold on to India. If both had joined hands, they would have thrown us out because the war was going on and we could not have taken care of India at that time. So, and so he says, Jinnah has been very important for me to invest in. Both these statements are there in the Jinnah book. Nobody can question them. So that's how the Punjab's situation is evolving. Then Lilithgow told Jinnah, you come up with some concrete demand so that we can sort of start supporting you. And then comes on the 23rd of March 1947, the Lahore Resolution, which immediately became famous as the Pakistan Resolution, demanding that in northeastern and northwestern India, where Muslims are in a majority, those areas be granted to the Muslims in the name of, because they are a nation and not just a minority. And so that's the generic name for such a demand, is the demand for Pakistan. So 23rd March 1947 onwards, day by day, month by month, you can see how this partition demand is evolving. Now, when Jinnah and the Muslim League made this call, 1 week later, Sir uh, Sundar Singh Majitia is on record saying that if the Muslims do not want to live in in uh, in India of all, then we will see that the Sikhs are not placed in Pakistan. So, who demanded the partition of Punjab then? Historically speaking, the Sikhs did first. And the Congress finally on the of 7th of March 1947, as late as that, 7th or 8th, I think, 8th of March 1947, finally issued a statement that we support the Sikh demand for the partition of Punjab. Why? Why did the Congress take so long? They were aiming all the time through the Quit India movement and other initiatives to somehow maintain India as a united country with a strong, effective center. And the Muslim League confronted them on all levels. You know, so I think I've told you the story of the political parties and what happened. We are now at the partition. So I think you need to pose further
So
questions.
I've got quite a few questions for you in there. So first of all, I wanted to touch on this topic of who actually was voting, who had the voting rights. I know it was not the general population voting. So when we're saying that the Muslims were represented or the Sikhs were represented or obviously there was many in the population who were unionists and there was many who actually did not know anything about what was going on in the politics in those days.
Yeah. Well, for the whole of India, only 10 to 11% of the population, adult population, was given the right to vote. There were two qualifications. One, that you were property owning and paying rent, revenue. The second was if you had, I think, a university or a high school education.
Fascinating.
So it didn't just apply to Punjab, it applied to the whole of India.
It's really interesting because that explains why most of the people we've interviewed had absolutely no idea of what was going on politically at that time. And then my other question for you as a follow-up to this was, we've interviewed a lot of people who, say that Sikhs specifically, that they also wanted a separate country, which of course now is a very contentious topic that in India, if you even bring it up, it can, it's the K word. It can bring about a lot of issues for people. So, but it's a really interesting historical point that needs to be spoken about. So do you know anything about the history of that and how that played out in 47?
How can I not know the history about that?
Of course you know it. I mean, I've heard plenty, but I want to hear
talk about the partition of Punjab. Well, let me give you the Sikh position. You see, the Sikhs were in a dilemma. The dilemma was that of the Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs, the only community which was rooted in all senses of the word in Punjab were the Sikhs. The Muslims were an all India community, and so were the Hindus. So the question is, why did the Sikhs not go with the Muslim League, keep the Punjab united, and retain their shrines, their history, everything in the Punjab in one place? What made the Sikhs demand the partition of Punjab? I think that's the question you are posing. Well, let me give you.
The question I'm posing is actually slightly different. So there were enough people.
I'll come to that. Why they demanded a separate state, from where the separate state idea comes. Now, this is how it happens. We fast forward, we go on the 1945 election. We have discussed the 1937 election. Now we come to the 1945 election, which is just 2 years before the partition. What happened in 1945? In 1945, you see, first of all, uh, the conservative Prime Minister Churchill, his party, the Conservatives, lost the elections.
Right.
And this was a major upset because he had won the war, but the people didn't like him because he was not into social reform. And England was devastated by the war. Okay. So the Labour Party comes into power and they declared that we will hold elections under the 1935 Act. I should have said by 1935, 10 to 11% of the population had been enfranchised. Okay. 1935 Act is after 1919 Act. There is 1909 Act, 1919 Act, and the final act is the 1935 Act. From that act, the franchise, the right to vote was extended from less than 5% to 10 to 11%. Okay. So that was the situation. Uh, so when the election campaign started, and I've quoted at great length the Punjab Governor Sir Bertrand Delancey and even Evan Jenkins later on, saying that the Muslim League is conducting the election campaign in rabidly communal lines. They are promising to the Muslims that the creation of Pakistan would be a liberation from the caste oppression, from Hinduism and the Hindu Sikh moneylender. And we will create a model Islamic state based on the traditions of the Holy Prophet and so on and so forth. So if you read my book, I quote the Punjab governors every fortnight what they had to say when the campaign was going on. What was the problem of the Congress? The Congress from August 1942 till June 1945 were all in jail because of the Quit India movement. So they were released only in June. And then it's too late to start a campaign, especially in the Punjab, because in 3 years the Muslim League had been encroaching in the Punjab and gaining the support of the landlords. Why? Because to everyone it was clear that the Punjab Unionist Party is no longer the favorite of the British because it's a limited party to a province. They wanted support from Jinnah and the Muslim League at the all India level. And Jinnah Sahib was helping recruit soldiers not only from Punjab but also elsewhere in India. So, and the landlords are very clever, they are very wise. As soon as they saw that the British are changing their patronage, they adjusted immediately. So from 1943, you find Sir Khizar Tiwana being left, the Punjab Unionist Party, people abandoning it and joining the Muslim League. So the Congress could not launch a counter campaign in the Punjab. The Sikhs had Akali Dals as the main party, but many smaller parties as well. Together, they were known as the Panthic parties. And they said, we will never ever accept being put in Pakistan. So these were the three positions. Okay. What did the election results produce? It produced a polarized communal result. Many of the Hindus from Haryana who used to vote for the Punjab Unionist Party now shifted their support to the Congress. Why? One, on the 1st of January in 1945, Sir Chotu Ram had died. So there was no Haryanvi Jat to lead them. And the Muslim support base of the Muslim League was rapidly turning towards the Muslim League. Okay. So in the election result, of 175 members of the Punjab Assembly, the Muslim League won 75 seats out of reserved seats of 86.
Wow.
The Punjab Unionist Party, which previously I told you had 73 when the number was 75, was now reduced to a lump of only 18.
Wow.
They got the rest of the Muslim reserved seats, 11, plus, Hindus and Sikhs who supported them elsewhere because it was an intercommunal party. The Congress, which previously didn't used to have many seats at all, got 50 seats. So the Hindu Mahasabha, which contested, the Communist Party of India, which contested, and so on, all were wiped out. It was a polarized vote. 6 for the Panthik parties, Muslim League, Muslims for the Muslim League, and the Hindus of Punjab, all over Punjab, voted for the Congress. And the Muslim League and the Congress had contested the 1945 elections on Congress insisting that the whole of India will be kept united, one India, and Muslim League that they need a mandate to demand the partition of India to create Pakistan. And the Sikhs said that never we will accept being placed in Pakistan. So in 1945, the Sikh leadership started meeting in the princely states, and they especially cultivated the Maharaja of Patiala and some other Maharajas. And the call was given that we want a separate Sikh state. So that's when the Sikh state idea was floated by the Sikhs. They said we
Can
don't
you
want.
name a few of these Sikh leaders?
Who were the Sikh leaders? Well, Master Tara Singh, Gyani Kartar Singh, they were both West Punjab leaders. Then Sardar Baldev Singh, who was a Punjabi but had this property in Bihar and all, rich man. Then the Maharaja of Patiala, and several other princes of Eastern Punjab. So these were the Sikh leaders. I find the Sikhs arguing that Master Tara Singh, because he was not a Jat, he was a Hindu who became a Sikh. That is why he supported the Congress. That is not true. Master Tara Singh was only one. All the Gyani Kartar Singh is a Jat. Baldev Singh is a Jat, I think. The Maharaja of Patiala and the other Maharajas were all Jats. And the Akalis supported it all along, which was dominated by the Jats at that time. So within the Sikhs, there is a mystification. The blame game goes on everywhere, who did what and who did this thing right, who did that thing wrong. But I'm here to demolish all mythology. Don't you worry. You just give me the time to talk about it. So that's when the Sikh demand comes up that they want Khalistan. The word is Khalistan given. In 1946, Jinnah Sahib met the Sikh leaders and said, okay, you tell me what will be the borders of the Sikh states, and Pakistan will grant you that. Why did he say that? Because the Sikhs were at that time 13.2% of British Punjab, and if you include the princely states, 14.1%. The poor Sikhs were not in a majority in any district of the Punjab, and there were 29 districts. They were not even in a majority in Amritsar or in Nankana Sahib, where Guru Nanak was born. Okay? And so Jinnah said, you tell me where will be the borders. What he had in mind was an idea which some Muslims had been floating, that we can grant a Sikh state but confined to the princely states.
Tepsu?
That's right, the princely states. But the Sikhs were all over the Punjab. Where would they go? So the basic demand was to grant us also, Eastern Punjab. And how could they then demand that if they agreed to include Hindus in that? So now we move towards the partition. Okay, Gunita ji and Aparjita ji, do you have any more questions before we move forward?
Yes,
Yes,
I
We
have
do,
one
but
question, sir.
okay, go ahead.
yes, yes.
Okay. Yes, like you have talked at length about the indigenous parties that were there and their influence, their demands, and the build up to the partition of India.
Yeah.
But what the power did the British administration still have over Punjab, and what was their role in all of this?
Well, once again, we have to move to the all India level. In 1943, when the second last Viceroy, Lord Wavell, came, and the outgoing Viceroy, Lord Linlithgow, told him, "Look, we are here for another 30 years." So the British in 1943 were saying they want to be in India at least till 1973. So, first of all, my argument is the British had no intention of leaving India. It is the Second World War which disabled them to hold on to India,
Right.
a huge colony. It was too big a colony, and it was going to cost them a lot now to maintain India because they didn't need such a big army when the war was over.
Yeah, and they lost Burma, and that weakened
Yes,
their
that's the
hold.
beginning of the decolonization.
Mhm.
They won the war, but Hitler smashed them as an economy. Do you know in 1947 till 1948 49, I think Punjabis ate better food than the English? Everything was on rationing. Tea, butter, wheat, everything. So bad were the conditions. And uh, the salaries of the British officers were being paid by the Americans. The American interest was that India should not be partitioned.
Yeah.
So that's another complication, but I'll respond to it only if you pose it as a question.
I
But
think we'll have a different conversation about that. There are so many
yeah,
deep things to explore about
that's
the
right.
Burma War and about the
That's
American.
right. That's right. We just confine ourselves to our little province, which is now in 2, 3, 4. So where was I? I was telling you about uh, what was the issue? The last one. Up, up, Aparjita,
The
what did you ask? Yeah.
Americans did not want it, and
No,
the
no,
salaries
Americans
were being
forget.
paid.
The
Now, what was your
British,
question? Is Vanessa?
the British was what was the British policy?
Yeah.
The British policy was not to give up India at all. So when the Second World War started and the war ended, and they couldn't hold on to India, they quickly had to make decisions what to do. That is why the partition of Punjab is so bloody, so gory, because everything was done in a very, very great hurry. But we come to it a little later. Okay? British policy was not only not to give up the whole of India, but definitely not the Punjab. But they had to. That was a compulsion. They just couldn't manage after the war. So your question is answered?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So Gunita, yes, yours, please.
I think another thing just to build on Aprajita's question, what was the actual power that the British had over, say, people in Punjab versus these different parties? Did the parties even have much power?
Well, the mainstream parties, which is the Punjab Unionist Party, was pro-British entirely, and they wanted Indian British rule to continue. Malik Skandar, Malik Khizr Hayat Tiwana is on record, I think, March 1947, when he goes and meets Mountbatten and says, "You are committing a major blunder. We don't want you to leave." Why? Because on the 20th of February, Prime Minister Attlee had declared that we will transfer power by June 1948. So Khizr Tiwana realized that the future of India will be decided by the British dealing with the Indian National Congress and the Muslim League. He had no more role to play if the British were leaving. So he's on record. But in that meeting, he said, do like this, make Punjab a third dominion, the Indian dominion, the Pakistani dominion, and an Indian dominion, Punjab dominion, Indian, Pakistani, Punjab dominion. But the British overruled it.
Why
So
so?
they didn't do it because they wanted to have a weak Pakistan, but strong enough to be a frontline state for a project they had in mind. That was to save the subcontinent from Stalin and the communists coming into India.
Fascinating. So they could have a hold over Pakistan.
Oh yes, I've demonstrated both in the Punjab book and in the Jinnah book. They are on record saying, I have a statement from Sir Francis Tucker, the head of the Eastern Command. You can read his book, While Memory Serves. It is in 2 volumes. I think in the first volume he writes, we need a Muslim state in northern Hindustan. An arc beginning from Algeria into Arabia Desertia, into Persia, and into northern Hindustan, where Muslim states should be strengthened, and this state should be the frontline state armed with Islamic ideology and British science. Now, the British are very good at euphemisms. British science means British weaponry, isn't it? And they also write in one of the memorandums that whereas Mr. Jinnah has expressed an interest in remaining in the Commonwealth, India may go its own way. Why? Because, as I told you, Nehru had already declared end of Zimidari and the Soviet model of development, which was anathema for the British. So partition for them was important to have a front line so that they could arm that state. And amazingly, the British themselves had to withdraw, but the Afghan jihad was carried out by Pakistan. Who masterminded this whole project? The British did. The Americans only financed it and executed it. But the real imperialist power in the world, which has left its mark, are the British.
Right.
So that's how it happened. Anyhow, shall we move to the Punjab
Yeah. The partition.
violence? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Violence, yes.
Yeah, Punjab violence. So now what happens is that, as I said, the election results produce 73 seats for the Muslim League, 18 for the Punjab Unionist Party, of which 4 then decamped and joined the Muslim League. It's the reverse now happening. The Congress 50 and the Sikh parties, Panthik parties 23. So first of all, the leader of the Muslim League, Nawab Mamdouh, was invited to form a government. So you need 86 seats to form a government in a house of 175. Okay? And Mamdouh could not produce it because there were 11 seats for the scheduled castes and Indian Christians and Anglo-Indians. And Mamdouh couldn't produce it. Then the Congress and the Sikhs went to Sir Khizr saying that we want you to head a coalition government in the Punjab. So a coalition government of the Punjab Unionist Party, the Indian National Congress, and the Sikh Panthik parties was formed. When that happened, the Muslim League, which originally had started the direct action in Calcutta, where actually violence is introduced on a grand scale in in Indian politics, now gave a call for direct action in Punjab. How did it happen? Let me very quickly give you this, how this spread. On the 16th of August 1946, rioting breaks out in Calcutta, and within 3-4 days, about 10-15,000 people are killed. Hindus, Muslims, and some Sikhs. Then that spreads eastwards into Noakhali and Tripura, and westwards into Bihar, where about 7,000 Muslims were killed. It was one-sided, killed by Hindus. In Bombay, there were riots, and I think about 500 Muslims were killed. Then, by December 1946, in Haripur Hazara district, which is on the border of Punjab, next to Rawalpindi, maybe 1,000 Hindus and Sikhs were killed.
We heard about the migration in 1946 out of Hazara because people in Rawalpindi saw it. So we've interviewed people in Rawalpindi who talked about the Hazaras coming through in 46.
Yes. Thousands of them came and took refuge in Rawalpindi. Why Rawalpindi? Because in western Punjab, northern Punjab, whereas Rawalpindi city had a Hindu Sikh majority, who were the richest, more powerful people in Rawalpindi? The Sikhs were, not Hindus. So that's another complication. So then on the 24th of January 1947, Tiwana orders police raids on the headquarters of the Muslim League and the RSS, claiming that both had weapons kept in these places, which the Muslim League leaders resisted. They were arrested, and then started an agitation in Punjab, where we find every day Muslims volunteering to be arrested, saying we want Pakistan. Okay? On the 26th of February, an agreement was reached. Let me give you one important date. The Punjab agitation of the Muslim League direct action was largely peaceful in the beginning. But as the days increased, they became more violence prone. And I've given some reports on this. On the 24th of February 1947, why I mention this, that's the same day I was born in Lahore. So that's the day.
Amazing. You're a midnight's child.
Yeah. The 24th of February is now becoming a problem because Putin attacked Ukraine also on the 24th of February. So I'm worried. I'm a very peace-loving person. And my birthday gets caught up with two, one war. And what happened on the 24th of February in Amritsar? There was a Muslim League agitation going on, when near the civil lines area, a police constable off duty was standing. This mob came and clubbed him down, killed him mercilessly. And that's when Master Tara Singh, the Sikh leader, said that the Muslim League agitation or direct action is not peaceful, it is communal, it's not political. On the 26th, however, an agreement was reached between the Punjab government led by Tiwana and the Muslim League, and people in the jails were released, and the Muslim League called off the agitation. But on the 2nd of March, Khizr Hayat Tiwana resigned. Why did he resign? One was a very personal thing. When the Muslim League carried out this agitation, they used most abusive Punjabi slogans against him. If you permit, I can recite them, but if you don't want to,
It's okay. Let's go. Yeah, I think for public education, sure.
Khizr kutta apni maan nal sutta.
Oh, wow.
Khizr dalla haye khaye. चलो भी चलो एक चीज मिलेगी क्या क्या भाई क्या खिजर की बेटी वाह भाई वाह
Wow.
you know
And
these
where
were
do we have the evidence for these slogans? Is it on flyers? Is it on recordings?
it's everywhere. When I conducted the research, I think you need to mention I spent 11 years collecting oral data from people who themselves did all this. I have spoken to the
Fascinating.
joint secretary of the Muslim Student Federation, which was the student wing of the Muslim League. I have talked to Hindus and Sikhs who were witness to it. I have talked to Christians who saw all this happen. You all must go through the oral histories which I've given, and
Yeah.
it's not
I
my
just wanted
collection.
our audience to know where,
Yes.
what the
All
citation
this,
is.
all this has been verified by many people, not just
Yeah.
one. So all these slogans, I mean, I can't devise them on my own. They are there is another slogan, ले लेके रहेंगे पाकिस्तान जैसे लिया था हिंदुस्तान यानी वी कॉन्कर्ड बाय आर्म्स so we will take Pakistan also by arms, this sort of slogans. But those against Khizr, I've remembered only 3 4. There were many more. Khizr Dullah, hi, this was another. Khizr the pimp, hi. Now Khizr Tiwana was a thorough gentleman, a landlord, but a decent man. He just couldn't stand this. And then on the 20th of February, the British had declared they are transferring power. So his role was over. If he had no one to support him, it would be Congress versus Muslim League.
Wow.
Okay. So now, then, this happens on the 2nd of March. Tiwana resigns. On some people say the 3rd, but definitely on the 4th of March, this communal rioting, violent rioting started. You have been to Lahore, huh, apna Gunita?
Yeah, of
And
course.
your family house on Lake Road, this is very
Yes.
close to where this happened.
Wow.
There is this government college Lahore, I'm sure you have seen.
Yes, I have.
In front of it is the Punjab Civil Lines, Lahore Civil Lines Police Station.
Okay.
Tell me what is associated with that police station. Do you know?
I don't know.
Because it was from here that Saunders, the British
Oh,
officer,
right.
and Bhagat Singh shot him dead just there.
Incredible.
And just in front of it is the hostel of the DAV college, which was a Hindu college, Arya Samajis. Okay.
Right.
So Hindu Sikh students came out of that hostel, crossed the road, which is called Kacheri Road, into this park in front of Government College, and they were shouting slogans that we will not let the Muslim League come to power. One thing I forgot. On the 3rd, a day earlier, in Purani and Arkali, I'm sure you went to an Arkali as well, because
Yes.
Lake Road and Arkali is exactly where you had
Yep.
your
Where they touch. That there's a chunk there, and
yeah.
where they
And
touch
there
is
is a
where my family
there's a
lived.
place called Kudi Bagh, yani girls Bagh. This is where the Hindus and Sikh leadership, all of them, Congress, Hindu Mahasabha, RSS, and the Sikhs met, where they made extremist uh, 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 speeches that we will never ever allow the Muslim League to form a government here. So on the 4th, the students come out, and the principal of Government College, Bukhari, who was otherwise a writer, summoned the police to come and bring things under control, and they started shooting these students. And I've met Hindus and Sikhs telling me that from 24th of January to 26th of February, when the Muslim League was carrying out the agitation, the police never fired. And now, when the government had gone and there was no government at least, so the police fired on these people and
Oh
many
my
were
God.
killed. Many were
Wow.
killed. By evening in the walled city, stabbing, if it was a Hindu Sikh area, then the Muslims will attack and vice versa. So Lahore went through this bloodbath. By the evening of the 4th, some people used to come from Amritsar to Lahore to work in the railway workshops. When they went back, they carried with them the news of what is happening in Lahore. So in Amritsar, I'm sure you must be knowing it very well. The main bazaar, what is it called? The main bazaar?
I'm not that familiar with Amritsar. I know it. I've spent a lot of
I
time
see.
there, but I don't.
Anyhow,
Yeah.
so there the first clash between the Sikhs armed with kirpans and the Muslims took place.
Mm.
So 4th evening, Amritsar gets involved. On the 5th morning, Multan, it was a Muslim majority district and city, but a substantial number of Hindus and about 1 or 2% Sikhs were living there. Okay, so there it was one-sided. The Muslims had an advantage. And then also on the 5th, the news reached Rawalpindi. And for the 5th and 6th, there were armed battles all over the city. And the Hindus and Sikhs were apparently better armed. But on the evening of the 6th of March, somehow the Muslim crowd, mob, whatever you want to call it, decided to move to the villages. And Rawalpindi district as a whole was 80% Muslim, but Rawalpindi city had a Hindu Sikh majority. That was the imbalance. But there were some very rich villages
Right.
in the Rawalpindi, Gujar Khan, Jhelum district, and Attak, where there was a massacre carried out for 1 week.
And entire villages disappeared, if I
Yes.
recall from oral
And
history.
if you go through my oral history, some of them are they shatter you as you read them, especially what happened in Damali. We don't have time, otherwise I can, at some point, you can just record some of the stories I think which are important to highlight. Anyhow, on the morning of the 13th of March, finally we find military, trucks coming and trying to restore the peace. The question is that in Rawalpindi, it was the head of the Northern Command. There were thousands of soldiers, including many Europeans. Why did the government not give them orders? This Aparajita,
Prajita.
yeah.
Yes.
Also, what were the British doing? There, I've given evidence that for a year and a half, I taught at God College Rawalpindi. I'm basically from Lahore, and the principal, Khwaja Masood, told me that at that time in 47, he was a young lecturer in Gordon College in the statistics department. And the principal was an American who went to the British High Commissioner and said, look, trouble has started in Rawalpindi, but we still have hundreds of Hindus and Sikhs in the hostels. So please send 2 soldiers and post them in front of the hostel to keep the peace. And the High Commissioner refused. Deputy Commissioner refused.
Wow. What is the reason for that?
Refused. Then I have evidence of 2 Sikh that I met in Rawalpindi. In Delhi. Rawalpindi Sikhs. Amar Singh and Madan Lal Singh. They said that they were in police custody when they heard some Muslim policemen saying that we have been given 3 days to carry out these attacks. Here is one more evidence.
Collaboration.
Yeah. And then the question is, why wait a whole week? You could reach these villages within an hour and a half at most, if you had dispatched the soldiers. But they didn't. So somebody wanted the Punjab to go through this process so
Yes.
that it could not be kept united. Now
Right.
we come to the Sikh questions. Why did the Sikhs?
Destabilizing. Right.
Yeah. So in March, when this happened, and the Sikhs claimed 10,000 people killed, but the official records put it at 2008. And this is typical. The government always gives a smaller number because the police who are recording it, they don't want to report that they have not been able to maintain the law. So the numbers are always very small. But my own estimate is that the truth must be somewhere in between. 5 to 7,000 Sikhs were killed mercilessly, okay? And about 40,000 then left Rawalpindi and went to uh, the princely states, where they started telling how they had suffered. So if you keep that in mind, the Sikh narrative then begins in eastern Punjab, how Muslims have mistreated them. And that's when the Sikh leadership from 45 onwards realized that if there is a partition, despite our demand, we will see that no Muslim stays in East Pakistan, in East Punjab. And
Except for
all
some
the
districts.
yeah, so and all the Sikhs who come from Western Punjab are concentrated in Eastern Punjab, so that for the first time in history, the Sikhs are in a majority in one compact area. So if you want to understand the Khalistan movement, it also is rooted in the partition. This was the
Absolutely. Absolutely.
it was the Sikh decision that, okay, first of all, we don't want the partition, we want Khalistan. If we don't get it, then we ensure that the Muslims here are driven out, and the Sikhs who come, they are concentrated here. You know, even now, if you go to India, most of the West Punjab Hindus are in Delhi and so on, but most of the Sikhs settled in Amritsar and in eastern Punjab. So you can imagine how this thing happened. So, uh, so on the 13th, finally the writ of the government is again established. So there is some sort of peace. But this is the lull before the storm, as they say, you know. For a while, it was quiet, and Mahatma Gandhi and Jinnah are on record issuing a statement also that please do not resort to violence and so on. But nobody was listening now. So in April, once again, communal violence erupted in Amritsar. And then in February, I didn't believe it, but this is true. You know, as a child, I've grown up listening in Lahore with my family and all, that the gundas of Amritsar sent bangles, you know, and henna to the gundas of Lahore, saying, dye your hands and wear the bangles, you are women. We as a minority are, you know, fighting the Hindus and Sikhs and have put them against the wall, and you have Hindus and Sikhs living in peace in Lahore. Where is your manhood? And you know, one of the witness to all this is Sir Ganga Ram's granddaughter, who I interviewed, you know. So in May, suddenly Punjab, in Lahore, there was a fierce attack on the Hindus and Sikhs, and thousands of them left. Do you know this, that while I was going through the research, you know, I came across a newspaper cutting that the Deputy Commissioner of Lahore, he issued a statement that we have found a packet full of bangles sent by the Amritsar gundas to Lahore gundas, you know. And I said, my God, this is true. It is not just people telling a story.
Yeah.
And then for some reason, when I wrote about it, his daughter, who lives in Dorset, I think, in England, She wrote to me and said, "This is true. My father was there and he used to tell us about this." So this is also in the Punjab book if you go through it. I think Mr.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Anyhow, the name is I'm forgetting. May this By that time Mountbatten had come. Mountbatten goes around talking to the leaders and he comes to the conclusion that there is no way to keep India united. It will have to be partitioned. And we find the British Army issuing a statement that we should have partition because Jinnah will be part of the Commonwealth, and Nehru and these people who are anti-imperialist and pro-Soviet, we can't trust them. So those statements are there. Then we come now to your 75 days, the 3rd of June, 1947. Here I'll go quickly because I think many people have. What does the partition plan says? It says that India will be partitioned into two independent dominions. But the partition was limited only to the British provinces. It did not apply to the princely states. They were not covered by this partition. Okay? And it was laid down that in Punjab and Bengal, which were Muslim majority provinces, we will have those assemblies deciding whether they wanted to join Pakistan or India. These were the only choices given to them. But the procedure was that both Bengal and Punjab were split into Hindu, Muslim in Bengal, and in Punjab, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh districts. For example, in Punjab, of the 29 districts, 17 were Muslim majority and 12 were Hindu, Sikh majority. So if either unit voted for partition, the province will be partitioned. Now, it is Jinnah who demanded the partition of India, but he said, sorry,
Bless you.
he said there should be no partition of Punjab and Bengal because they are Muslim majority provinces. They should be given as a whole to us. But it's the Sikhs of Punjab who said we will never accept living under the Muslims. So they demanded the partition of Punjab, which the Congress supported on the 8th of March 1947, as late as that. So now when the voting took place, the Hindus of Bengal voted, in the 12 districts where they were in a majority for the partition. And in although they were in a minority there, and in Pakistan and in Punjab also, the 17 districts by majority voted for Pakistan, but the 12 districts, Hindu Sikh majority voted for the partition. So the partition is actually a demand not of the Muslim League and the Muslims. It's a reaction or a response to the Muslim League demand to divide India on the basis of religion. And in English, there is a saying, what is good for the goose is good for the gander. If you want India to be partitioned on the basis of religious majorities and minorities, then you have no moral argument denying that to those parts of these two Muslim majority provinces where the non-Muslims were in a majority. But another problem with the 3 June plan was that it was based on a false optimism that while the country will be partitioned and the officers were given a chance to choose India or Pakistan, the populations will stay put. Now that doesn't make any sense to anyone. It was like deceiving yourself because the Punjab governors were writing now every fortnightly and in between also sending telegrams that Punjab is going to go through a bloodbath because no partition of Punjab will be acceptable to the 3 communities. And So, anyhow, the 20th of June, the date today,
It's today.
yeah, the Bengal Assembly had voted uh, to partition Bengal. On the 23rd of June, the Punjab Assembly voted to partition Punjab. But the fact that now this partition will be implemented peacefully was delusional, deceptive, but everybody went along because when Mountbatten wanted all of them to support it, they said, yes, we will ensure that there will be peace, but there was no peace. One thing more, before we come to the 3rd June plan, on the 15th and 16th of May 1947, Mountbatten arranged for Jinnah and Liaquat Ali Khan to meet the Sikh leaders in Delhi. Who represented the Sikhs?
Baldev Singh.
Sorry?
Was it Baldev Singh? That's the photographs we see.
Baldev Singh is one. Baldev Singh is one. Master Tara Singh.
But he wasn't there, was he, in those meetings?
I think he was there. He was definitely
We
there.
don't see him in the photos that they have.
Okay, maybe he was not there. Then Hardeep Singh Malik, Maharaja of Patiala, and I think Gyani Kartar Singh also. But if he's not in the picture, there must be, then he was not there.
Maybe he was.
Maybe, but that's not important.
Right.
Where Jinnah then told the Sikh leaders that he gave the example of the Egyptian ruler Zaglul. He said, when the Coptic Christians, in Egypt, 10% of the population is Christian. They came to him for guarantees that what will happen to us if we become free now. And he said, you can write whatever you want and I'll give you guarantees that we will respect them. And Jinnah said, I'll do the same. I will blindfolded sign whatever you write down. Hardeep Singh Malik and Patiala I've quoted. Hardeep Singh Malik says, now we were in a quandary. Here was a Muslim leader promising us everything. So what should we do? He says, then a flash came to me and I said, Mr. Jinnah, sir, you are promising us everything. But when the day comes to implement this, and God forbid you are not there, what will happen? And Jinnah is on record saying something which is actually blasphemous. He said, my friend, in Pakistan, my word will be like the word of God. Yani if I promise here, it will be respected by the Pakistanis. And Hardeep Singh Malik and the rest say that we looked at each other and realized that Mr. Jinnah was out of touch about what was going on. And one thing more, when the March massacre of the Sikhs took place, I have made a very strong point of this in the book. Jinnah, Nehru, the Punjab leader, Nawab Mamdod, who represented Punjab Muslim League, none of them issued a statement condemning those killings or expressing sympathy for the Sikhs. I think that is when Jinnah lost the chances of winning over the Sikhs. Because had they done something in March, gone there, visited there, Nehru came, Mountbatten came, Mrs. Lady Mountbatten came, but none of the Muslim League leaders went there and showed their sympathy for the Sikhs. And so the Sikh leadership had no trust in the Muslim League. So the Sikhs rejected this offer of the Muslim League. Because what did Jinnah demand? They said, what we want is that you demand the partition of India, then within Pakistan we will give you all the rights you demand of us. So the Sikhs overruled it. And then and I know, as the days proceeded, the escalation of violence day by day increased. So then comes the Radcliffe Award. Do you have time for us to go into the boundary commission proceedings, or it is too much?
Well, we've actually gone way over time, but but we can certainly do a little overview of it and come back for a deeper conversation.
Okay, only an overview. So, in the 3 June plan was also that in both provinces, Bengal and Punjab, if they decide to partition their provinces, boundary commissions will be set up in which the principal parties will have their representatives, they will nominate the judges, and they will present the cases. So, for example, in the Punjab, uh, the Congress and the Sikhs nominated uh, Justice Mahajan and Justice Teja Singh. The Muslim League nominated Justice Deen Muhammad and Justice Munir. So, 4 judges. The chairman was Sir Radcliffe, who was sitting in Delhi. He never came to Lahore, never went to Calcutta. Every day the proceedings were sent to him by plane. Okay. So, when the uh, arguments were presented by all sides, they took maximalist positions. The Hindus and Sikhs claimed that Sialkot, Gujranwala, Sheikhupura, Lahore, Montgomery, which is now called Sahiwal, and Lailpur, which is now called Faisalabad, all should be given to India because the Khalistan, the six state idea was overruled in the 3 June plan. There was no possibility for the Sikhs getting their state. Okay. That these should be given to India on the basis of their services in developing these districts and their investment. They said 75% of the revenue and 80% of all businesses and industries are owned by us. So just the majority factor should not be counted in to grant these areas to Pakistan. Because in the terms of reference, it was Muslim and non-Muslim contiguous areas will be separated and other factors will be taken into account. The Muslim League said that the main thing is contiguous Muslim, non-Muslim majority areas. Other factors is a special case. The Sikh and Congress argued that in English, when you say and, it doesn't mean it is of lesser uh, 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 quality. So, and means also other factors. And the other factors are how much we have contributed to the development of these districts, where we have so much property, so much investments. But in the Radcliffe Award, I have argued against all Pakistani argumentation that 99% of what the Muslim League wanted was granted to them. And actually, this is based on the 7 February 1946 demarcation plan, which Lord Wavell had already laid down that this is how we will partition India if we have to leave. Okay. So, anyhow, when this was ready by the proceedings were from the 21st of July till the 29th of July. And since the 4 judges couldn't agree, according to the terms of references, the chairman could give an award. An award is something which you can't question. Remember, this is the legal status. So poor Radcliffe is blamed for nothing. He actually could not have done anything else except follow what Wavell had laid down. So the Radcliffe Award and the Radcliffe Line, the way it is drawn, is exactly as Wavell said. The only Muslim majority district of which 3 tehsils were given to India is Gurdaspur. Gurdaspur in 1931 had a Hindu Sikh majority, but by 1941, which is the last census, it had become 85%, 85,000 more Muslims, which is less than 1%. So it was a very thin majority. But if you look at Wavell had argued, because he was a military general, that if Gurdaspur goes to Pakistan, then Amritsar is like jutting into Pakistan. It is surrounded in the south by Lahore, from the front by Gujranwala and Sialkot, Gujranwala and Sheikhupura, and then on this side, north, east, and all by Gurdaspur. And that will become indefensible. So, three tehsils of Gurdaspur, which are on the eastern side of the Ravi, should be given to India, and one tehsil, which is on the western part of the Ravi, Shakargarh, should be given to Pakistan. So, that's the only deviation. I mean, that is 99% the same. Why I say 99.9%, only three villages in Kasur Tehsil were given to India because they were on the Sutlej side and they were Sikh majority villages. So there is no mystery about the Radcliffe Award either. This was ready officially after much discussion. Some say on the 8th, some say on the 9th, but definitely the 13th. On the 16th, the leaders were brought together and told that this is the award. On the 17th, it was made public through All India Radio. And then that is when hell broke out because there were millions of Hindus and Sikhs on our side, Pakistani side, and millions of Muslims on the Indian side. And in the end, because this area was where every second person had some experience of carrying weapons or had tried weapons because of so many soldiers who had been demobilized from the First World War, who were armed, and then princely states had their own armies, and then you had the Gunda police, lower bureaucracy networks, operating in these villages and in these areas. I have said that, I'll end here for you. I have said this is a classic case of Thomas Hobbes' idea of a state under law degenerating into the state of nature, a war of all against all.
Yeah.
But I've said actually there is a third level in the partition of Punjab. You see, when this was announced, would you believe it? People believed, even the Congress, the Sikhs, and the Muslim League, that Gurdaspur would be in Pakistan. So, for about 2 days, from the 15th to the 17th, the Deputy Commissioner of Gurdaspur was Ishtiaq Ahmed Chima, a Muslim. And then, when on the 17th this became public and they realized that this is part of India, they had to flee. Similarly, neither the Muslim League nor the Sikhs had really informed the villages that the partition is already decided on the 3rd of June. So you might be on the wrong side. People were caught completely off,
Absolutely.
uninformed, off balance.
Right.
And so they were easy prey for all those people who wanted to take their women, their money,
Property.
their property, their shops. And that is why I say that at the end of the day, the partition of Punjab is not simply forced migration, it is ethnic, religious cleansing.
Absolutely.
6 million Muslims had to run from East Pakistan, East Punjab, 4.5 million Hindus and Sikhs from West Punjab, and of the 1 million estimated killed during during the partition, 800,000 were Punjabis. And according to, now everybody knows this, 14 to 15 million Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs crossed the border from all over India during the partition, and it is the greatest forced migration in history or migration in history. But do you know, Punjab's population, that time the total population of India was 390 million. So 1 million killed, 14 to 15 million uprooted. But let's come to the Punjab. It was 28 million if we just count the 29 districts. If you add the princely states, it becomes 34 million. Of the 34 million, 800,000 were killed. And of these 34 million, 10 million had to run for their lives. So 30% of the population of Punjab crossed the border. That is why the Punjab partition is incomparable.
Right.
It's the real partition of India.
Well,
You can't compare it with any other. If you want, I can speak about Bengal. Bengal after 46 didn't have to experience this because Gandhi ji then took Sohrawardi, the chief minister of Bengal, and he was in Calcutta. And when the Hindus came to kill them, kill the Muslims, he said, "Kill me first." And because of him, thousands of Muslim lives were saved. It's
but
only
Professor Ahmed, the violence and migration in Bengal, maybe they were not as bad as Punjab, but they were very prevalent. Like thousands, millions of people were impacted, at least from our oral histories. That's what we see.
from our province. But in 1950, then, from East Pakistan, 10,000 Hindus, both scheduled caste and upper caste, were killed and thrown into India. And so that's also part of the partition story. I think I've told you everything.
Well, we're going to dig deeper into some of these points in future episodes. Thank you so much. I wanted to tell one quick little story from an oral history interview. Maybe you'll have some input on this. So you may know Lord Rummy Ranger from the UK. His father's story is really, really fascinating. It's in our archive because he was actually not alive at the time, but his...
What's his name? Say it again slowly.
Lord Rummy Ranger.
Never heard of him. Anyhow.
Yeah, so he's in the British House of Lords. His older brother we've interviewed, who was alive at the time, and his father was assassinated in quite early on in the 1940s, I believe maybe it was 1942. Maybe I'm getting the story wrong, but he was in Multan district, and he was associated with the Unionist Party for being a leader in the Unionist Party. He was assassinated. It was a political assassination. So I think that's really fascinating that some of these assassinations were taking place in the 40s in this manner.
One day we can discuss the march riots only. You know, these four cities. Before I pop off, before I hit the bucket, you better get everything out of me.
Yeah, so no, nothing like that. That is too morbid. Okay, that is too morbid. So no, we will. I would
my grandfather lived to be 105. My grandmother 102. So I have a good chance of being around for some time.
150. Yeah, we'd love to bring you back to kind of dig deeper into some of these specific episodes, because I feel like we could talk on each of these episodes for so long. But I think today's show will definitely end here because it's been an hour and a half and it's been wonderful. Thank you so much, Professor Ahmed, for coming and shining a light. And separately, I'll talk to you about some of the other intriguing finds in the oral histories and compare them with your findings. I think there's just so much to dig here.
Let me mention one thing, that 90% of the interviews I did over a period of 11 years, they can be accessed at LUMS Partition Archives. LUMS is Lahore University of Management Sciences. They have partition archives. So people are on record on what they did and what they saw and what they experienced. So those who want to have a direct, exposure, and listen to those.
That's a very useful information.
90%.
Yeah. I've actually, when I visited LUMS, they hadn't started that yet, but they were talking about trying to digitize your interviews. This was, I think, around 2015. And so it's very, very cool that they've got it up and running now.
So no singing today, Haji?
No singing today.
We'll do it another time, huh? Can nahi? You want me? Can nahi? Bolo yaar.
Yes, you can, sir.
Absolutely. We'd love to have you back here soon.
No, I won't sing the whole thing, but I'll just sing maybe a small one. ये पंजाबी में ताकि touch भी तो हो जाए ना.
बिल्कुल, sir.
Now this is a song. Let me give its history. The music director was a 17-year-old person, Akhtar Hussain, and when he composed this tune, The song is sung by Madam Noor Jahan. O.P. Nayyar, the great Indian music director, who originally was from Lahore, when he heard this, he said, all my songs are on one side, and this song, composed in rag, um, what was the rag, yaar? Um, is a greater one, you know. But let me sing it for you. Maybe I remember the rag also. ठीक है? कली कली जान दुख लख ते करोड़ वे दूर जान वालिया मोहरा हुन मोड़ वे कली कली जान दुख चन्ना तेरी याद नाल दुख असा फोलिया दुख असा फोलिया हौली हौली हंजुआं दा बुआज खोलिया बुआज खोलिया बैरी होया जग मेरा तेरी अज लोड़ वे दूर जान वालिया मोहरा हुन मोड़ वे कली कली जान. This is Rag Pilu. Rag Pilu.
Thank you so much. That was so
My
beautiful.
pleasure, जी, my pleasure. Take care. All the best.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
आप
Thank
जब
you
भी
so
याद
much, sir.
करोगे,
Bye, everyone.
जब भी याद करोगे ना, हम अवेलेबल हैं. बस याद किया करें
Absolutely.
आप.
Absolutely. We'll be in touch with you about more episodes. Maybe smaller,
Thank you.
we'll focus on certain points.
Thank you very much. All the best. जी.
Thank you.
Thank you so
We'll
much,
talk
sir.
to you soon. Bye.
Bye.